Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 2 of officially Breaking Blocks. Last time we didn't have a name, but this time we do. Obviously, pun on blockchain, but also breaking a bit of norms, especially from a founder's perspective, to where sometimes we don't always want to talk about the ugly things that inevitable are going to happen whenever you're trying to stand up a project. So today I'm super excited to introduce our guest, Chad Barraford, one of the founders and lead developers with Thorchain, where he'll talk you through exactly what Thorchain is and everything. I won't take that from him, but I'm also excited to hear about some of the hard lessons that goes into building any project, but especially one that was ambitious, innovative, and also very successful as well. So, Chad, thank you for taking time to join us today.
Thanks for having me. I love the coffee mug just kind of comes in as like get the steam coming out. It's a nice little touch. I like it. I like it.
You know, it's like, oh, it's floating.
No, thanks for having me and inviting me onto the pod. Like, this is an interesting topic, and obviously, as you said, like not a lot of people like to talk about it, but you have to wear your scars, and be aware, just and this for the sake of educating others to learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, for sure. So I look at this as much about as like me trying to educate myself as a founder and builder in the space as much as like I want to educate others there too. So I'm super curious to like learn and hear as well. For those like the uninitiated, so to speak, why don't you just give us a quick overview of like what Thorchain is and also sort of like status quo?
Sure. Yeah. So Thorchain's at its highest level, it's a DEX, right? And what makes it unique and different than all the other DEXs out there is that it's chain and asset agnostic. So it can swap and add assets between pretty much any blockchain out there. UTXOs, EVMs, crypto nodes like Monero is possible. Polkadot, I don't know, Cosmos, like all the things. And so because it's able to work with any asset in any chain, it can swap Bitcoin to Ethereum, Ethereum to Doge, Doge to AVAX, AVAX to BNB, BNB to something else. And so it's very kind of allows you that like liquidity to move quickly across chain without being KYC'd or any of these things.
Awesome. The first question I have, when I hear that is when all the hacks that happen in the different bridge protocol and platforms, how do you approach that? I mean, this is very complex, but at the end of the day, you need to provide like a product to end user that is safe. And what are the hurdles to build this kind of product? I'm really curious.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't consider Thorchain to be a bridge, right? So to me, when a bridge is when you take one asset, let's just call it Bitcoin, and then you lock it up, and then you mint a new coin on the destination chain called TBDC or WBDC or one of these things. That's a bridge because you're actually taking something and you're bridging it across and creating the asset on the other side. You're bridging the asset itself to the other side. Thorchain doesn't do that. It just swaps Bitcoin for Ether, right? And so it transfers value across from one chain to the next, but not the assets across the chain. So as you would not call a Coinbase or a Binance a bridge, Thorchain is identically the same to what Coinbase and Binance do, but just does it in a decentralized way rather than a KYC'd and process. And so we are almost identical to what Binance does or Coinbase, but we just do it in a decentralized fashion. But you're right. Bridges in the past obviously have been huge targets of attacks. Probably well over $1 billion has been lost from a bunch of different bridges. And I think that's partially because bridges take on a lot of risks because they are centralized entities. They are trustful entities. Like you can't actually build a bridge and have it economically. You can't do that. Having like wrap tokens and such, it's just not practical. So you have to go through some sort of trusted federation, right? It was all these bridges work through some sort of trusted federation. It could be, WBDCs through that company, and other ones are for other ones. But the team is oftentimes the operators of bridges. But you have the centralized risk of the individuals who hold the coins, right? Actually custody the coins, can go ahead and like steal them and run off, which has happened in the past, right? But then you also take on the risk of like protocol risk of there being some sort of bug, right? Some sort of exploit, right? So we've seen one where one of the devs got attacked and clicked on a malicious PDF and then leaked the private keys to the attacker. And because it's centralized and the dev had access to the keys, coins and funds were lost. And we've also seen more like smart contract risk or code risk, protocol risk, where you lose funds to that mechanism. So you're taking like the risks of CeFi and the risks of like DeFi, and you're combining them to create an ultra risk system, right? And this is a problem we've seen with bridges, which is why we've seen so much money lost. But Thorchain does not have the CeFi risk. It has the DeFi risk. It has the contract risk. It has the protocol risk. You can't run a protocol and not have protocol risk. It's just not possible. But so we'd only have part of that risk. But even with that, we still have had our fair share of scars and attacks and these kind of things over time. Some are intentional, some are non-intentional. We got like dust attack once from chain analysis, way back when. We have had hacks in the early days. So I think what we learned through our process. So we've been hacked, I think total, I want to say 3 or 4 times. I could be mistaken about that. I kind of forget. It was years ago. But in our earliest days of our public beta, what we called ChaosNet, right? We knew that we were launching something very complex. It took us years to design and years to build it. Not something you just like, it's not a smart contract you write in a weekend and deploy to Ethereum. It's something much more complicated than that. And so it took a long time to design this thing and build this thing. And we knew when we launched it, there could be bugs, there could be exploits, there could be problems. It'd be naive to think that wouldn't be the case. And so when we launched it with a cap on liquidity, right? So we weren't going to launch it and then like day one allow $1 billion into the protocol. That would be, in my opinion, that would be highly irresponsible. We've seen protocols do that, and literally like day 2 they have $1 billion, and then day 5 there's like massive exploits. Like we've literally seen that in DeFi a few years ago. And so we had a couple of bugs in the early days of our beta, and which we patched, worked it out. We reimbursed all the funds that were lost. I think it was about 15 million in total, which relative to DeFi, that's not really a whole lot, but to us, it's a lot. And we reimbursed all the LPs that lost any funds from this thing. We just gave the money back to them through the treasury. But we learned really important lessons, right? That I think the rest of the industry should learn from those as well. One is that in general, like audits aren't as useful or as valuable as people think that they are, right? To this day, we've probably spent millions on audits. We've had, I think, maybe 6 to 12 audits in total, like somewhere in there. We actually have an audit going on right now, auditing our TSS. And to this day, none of them have ever found a significant issue, not one. We've had many over the time, like doing infrastructure audits, code audits, threshold signature audits, all sorts of different components. Not one has caught an actual like P1, like, severe issue. But we've had issues in the code base that just weren't discovered by those auditors, right? And so one of the things that I had learned is that auditors are not very good at finding issues in general, just because they're taking a look at a code base for a short period of time, trying to find some stuff and walking off. And what's actually a much more effective tool, if you want to find bugs and exploits in your code, my recommendation for you is not to say don't do audits. You can still do them as well. It doesn't hurt. It costs money, but it doesn't hurt. But to build your own security team, a full-time internal security team. And so we built Thorsec, which is a group of security-minded individuals who have been white hats and black hats over their course of life and throughout DeFi. And their full-time job is to audit every bit of the code. Every time there's a code change, they will approve it. It has to be approved by the security team in order for any code to be merged to master. So it just becomes like a continuous process of security, rather than doing an audit in a particular moment in time, and then, all right, we did our security check, we're good, right? It's much more effective to have somebody who's long-term aligned to the project, who's highly invested into it and really wants to see the thing succeed, whereas an auditor doesn't give a shit whether your project succeeds or not. And they just have a long view of it, and they are constantly looking at, constantly trying to find problems, constantly trying to solve issues, and are around for that. That's a much more effective way to handling this stuff. So I would recommend any team out there to build your own security team to constantly work on security and making sure everything's button.
That's a super interesting approach. Like you've basically built your own red team within the company. So that's really cool. But do they code as well, or they are very independent? Like because you could have like a certain they could do the same mistake, like because it's the same code base at some point, like you it's not that you get bored, but you get used to, and so you are not as sharp as you were in the early days. So how do you handle that on your side?
Yeah, I mean, they do code. They can code. They don't code very often, to be honest. They will comb the code base, and they will, when they find something that they feel this could be adjusted from a security perspective. Like sometimes that's just like something as simple as removing dead code. Sometimes it's more complex of refactoring the code to operate structured differently. Like cache. One example is one of the team had the ability for the network to have better caching of the context of the changes, like caching the changes that are being made in the chain and not committing it until everything passes, there's no errors or anything else. So that was like one example of thing they refactored so that we could catch bugs earlier. That wouldn't be, have less opportunity for issues to exist through that kind of code change. So they definitely do code change from time to time, but I would say the majority of their time is just spent reviewing and auditing current PRs that the devs are predominantly making, of adding new features or fixing bugs or what have you.
So Chad, whenever you talked about this, like this hack that you were speaking about, the $15 million one, you said you've had like 3 or 4. Which one was that? Was that like the most recent one that I think I remember seeing, or was that in the early days as well?
Oh, no, they all happened within like a couple of weeks,
Oh, really?
2 years ago, right? So the source of all those problems was because the developer building the connection to Ethereum wasn't a Solidity developer and didn't understand all the gotchas, all the booby traps within Solidity. And there is a fuck ton of those, right? And so he didn't quite understand what could be manipulated within a transaction on Ethereum. And our guy that did know Solidity fairly well wasn't working side by side with him and should have been. That was the root of every one of the issues we had. And all of them were based manipulation, Solidity based, that kind of stuff. We've since obviously solved all those issues, and we haven't had an issue since, and that's been, we haven't had a bug, we haven't had an exploit since then. So it's been 2-3 years, whatever the hell the number is. But that was just part of that dev just not having a good understanding of Solidity.
Got you. So walk me through what the days look like from like your perspective whenever the hacks are occurring, because 2 years onward, like you're super well composed and you're like, shit happens. Like it's 15 mil here, 15 mil there. What the fuck are you gonna do? But like in the moment, I'm sure it wasn't like that. So walk us through what that looks like, and sort of kind of like the all hands on deck process as you're going through hack 1, and then you're like, fuck man, hack 2 and 3, but ultimately coming out on the opposite end, which we see now, where you can look back on it and say, super glad those things happened.
Yeah. So they're not fun, as you could probably guess. And they're highly fucking stressful. And they happen anytime, middle of the night, middle of the day. I think at one of them I was like at the zoo with my wife and my wife's sister, and I'm just like, I gotta go home right now. You know what I mean? Like I gotta get home real fast. So they can happen anytime. and they're highly stressful, right? And the whole community is, also, watching this happen, and they have 1,000 questions, and we have 1,000 questions, and all the devs and get on and try to figure out what's happening and blah 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 and all these things, and we had built in something we call the Mir admin, which is basically an ability for devs to be able to pause trading, for example. It can't like withdraw funds or anything like this. It can only just like pause some operational things, some features or some trading or a particular chain or something like stuff. And so that was very helpful to be able to pause things when something's going wrong, especially in those early days of those beta when you're still kind of like finding your footing in a sense. And so that's very helpful. So you can pause things, do an analysis of the transaction, what came through, what triggered what, and then try to figure out what the bug was, find the solution. And then, but that's not all. Like, people are freaking out, people are yelling, in the discords, and they're like upset about X, Y, and Z. They're oftentimes like, oh, it's an inside job, or like, the conspiracy comes out rather quick, and everyone starts yelling about or something like this, right? And it's always, everything is always an inside job, apparently.
It's always a rug.
It's always a rug. It's always
a rug.
Sometimes it is, and honestly, sometimes it's not. But and then it becomes the long-term process of like, all right, how do we make it right? Right. So we, 15 million total out of the total, I think it was 3 or 4 hacks, 15 million total. How do we make it right? And then we have to find the funds to do so, right? And we did that mainly through the treasury, I think, to go loan out through some Ethereum protocol. I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head. That was a long time ago. But that's the other part too, right? And long term, like once you've been hacked, that shadow does not just like go away. Even to this day, it's still something we obviously talk about. We're talking about it right now, which is perfectly fine. But it's just kind of the shadow that's just cast over the project over a long period, and people like lose trust in it because of it, which I understand why. Like, I don't blame anybody for that. But at the same time, like, almost every project in crypto, like 90% of them have gone through, one exploit or a hack or whatever. Like, everything, like Uniswap has, I think, and Compound has, and it's just a common thing to happen because it's code, like, and you can't write perfect code, just not possible. It's always going to have bugs, it's always going to have issues. It's hopefully the bugs aren't severe ones, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Like, as you're talking about, where there's a long shadow that's cast on it. So even with one hack to the fourth hack, like, how are you guys managing that? Because one hack's one thing, but then like another one comes in successive days or weeks, and then another, and then another. So like, this space is very short-oriented, short-term focused. And yes, they are always quick to point the finger, like, oh, what an unprofessional team. How the hell could they get hacked? It's a rug and all these different things. So obviously, like, in my opinion, and I've known you for a while, Chad, but Thorchain is one of the best managed projects. But more than that, it's got one of the most like fervent communities of people that appreciate what it is, but then also around the token RUNE there as well. So how did you guys go through that process and still manage in 2 years forward to come out on the opposite side? Because it's really interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of projects do not have what I call like grit, right? And the ability to, like, when the days are the darkest and it looks like the whole thing is done, right? And to have the pair of balls to stay in it. And oftentimes you see a lot of projects just kind of exit in the bear market, and because token price is down, community's upset, blah blah blah, and for a lot of founders at that time, they've already made millions from the bull market, and they're like, fuck it, I don't need to do this anymore, fuck this shit, and they just walk off into a sunset with their money. And that's obviously not the right mentality to have, for sure. And so for us, we went through several hacks in a very short period of time, and they were all just from the same thing. It was all from just like Ethereum related things that the dev didn't really quite understand. It's all like the same root cause of it all. And then after, like, I think the third one ever, we just decided, we're going to put everything on pause for months, and we're going to restructure this entire thing from a security perspective, right? So that's when we built the Thorsec team. We went out, we hired security people to come in. We made changes around what we call the solvency checker. So the network checks its own solvency, and as soon as things gets insolvent, it just self pauses to have it kind of be defensive, right, in the way that it works. So we did that. We did like delayed outbounds, another thing we added. So when we have a lot of funds going out, those funds get delayed for up to 1 hour before they actually get signed and sent out. So if somebody sent in some like fake Ethereum tokens, let's just say, so like we think we have, you know, 500 Ethereum tokens, but in reality it's, you know, 0. And then we will find the solvency will be like, oh, hey, we think we have 2,000, you know, Ethereum tokens in total, but we only have 1,500. This ain't right, and then it will just go ahead and pause it. So before the funds are even sent, because those are delayed, the entire chain is just paused. So it's an automatic kind of defense mechanism that has like a very kind of like broad ranging system. So that even if you find some new exploit that we not aware of, we have this kind of blanket layer of protections through the delayed outbounds, through solvency checkers, and all these, and a series of other things as well. And that to me is like the smart way of going at it is to find as many like blanket protections, because like you will never know whether or not there are more exploits in your code. Like it's a known unknown. You know that you don't know if there's more or not, and you can spend all the money you want and hire all the devs you want and to do all the audits you want, to do as many things, to review the code as many times as you want. But it's a needle in a haystack oftentimes, and you may not find all the needles, and you don't know how many needles are actually in the haystack. And so you know that some level there could be more exploits. You never know if there's not. And so the best thing to do is just to create as many like blanket protections as possible, so that even if somebody finds a needle in that haystack, they wouldn't be able to extract the funds from the network, right? That's what I had realized, what I had learned through that process of those dark days back then, was that we will never know if there's more exploits. There's not possible to. Let's just figure out the best protections, blanket protections of the networks we can apply, so that even if somebody were to find an exploit tomorrow, it wouldn't really yield anything. In fact, the delayed outbound is designed in a very interesting way, where because of that delay, it makes more financial sense for a black hat to be a white hat, because you'll actually make more money on the bug bounty, right? And that's another thing you should have, a bug bounty, by the way. But you'll make more money on the bug bounty than you would in extracting the funds, because the funds not much of the funds would be able to leave. So you've actually like inverted the economics, the incentives of being a black hat versus a white hat, and say that, you know what, everybody should be a white hat, because you'll make more money as a white hat than you would as a black hat.
That's interesting. I'd like to come back on the say that those events were very, very stressful. Like, do you have can we come back on that? Like, do you have advice like for founders or wannabe founders to be maybe prepared for those events? Because I imagine like maybe because of the stress, like everyone yelling at you, it can be like really annoying. Like when you want to find and understand the problem and maybe patch it, pose the things, etc. So do you have advice for founders to be prepared for those different events?
Yes. If you find yourself in that scenario, unfortunately, do your research, do a deep dive into what happened. Try not to say anything too early, right? Before you know it. Just keep it very vague in the beginning of like, we're aware of unusual activity, whatever it is, and devs are looking into it. We'll let you know once we've done our full analysis. If you start getting too early and start like, well, it could be this and it could be that, and like, you know, we have some reason to believe it's this, but maybe something's over here. You just create confusion and hysteria and more kind of like things that people to like latch onto and extrapolate new ideas and kind of go off into you know, some fairy tale land of like, oh, this is all the wallets were hacked and this happened and then the rug happened and I don't know. It's better just in the early days until you actually fully understand what happened, to just keep it vague and keep it simple and say as little as you can. And then once you know, done your research, done your investigation, whatever it is you want to call it, and you know what happened, then you can write, you know, a blog post or whatever it is, and explain what happened, explain what you're going to do about it, and how you're going to prevent it in the future.
That was a really good question, Merlin, and that's a really good answer, Chad, as well. So you mentioned one thing or two things that stood in my mind, and I think it's front of my mind because as we talk right now, we're sort of in the dog days of the bear market, and all projects that are still around kicking and fighting, they have to have balls and they have to have grit to keep going in the face of who knows, like the next turn of the bull cycle has been, people have been saying that for a bunch of time now, but at the end of the day, no one really knows. So you just have to keep marching forward and trying to tackle your vision, whether that your roadmap is 6 months, 12 months, or you're just looking out at that North Star as to what your original vision, your end state was whenever you decided to start the project. And I know that is kept me going in a lot of ways. I agree wholeheartedly that this space, like especially with bear markets, it's filled with weak people. Like, and that goes from top to bottom, not just talking about founders, but also investors and all advisors, service providers, etc. Like whenever shit hits the fan, they don't have the balls to keep moving forward. And everyone's got their own breaking point. No one is immune or a machine. But I think whenever you have a vision as to like why you get up and do what you do and eat the shit that you eat on a daily basis, it allows you to take more punches than other people necessarily would be able to do. So from your perspective, like what is your like vision? What is you or your team's like end state that allows you to not only weather what you went through as we're talking about these exploits that were 2 years ago, but now coming out seemingly in a bear market, but more than that, building probably you guys have been busier more than ever in a bear market, and it now seems to be turning the corner and benefits for you and the team. So what is that end state or that vision or that goal that allows you guys to continue to get up and eat the shit that you guys eat on a daily basis?
Well, it's not money. And so for a lot of projects, a lot of devs and founders, the goal is money. And if the goal is money, then if the money's gone, then you're going to be gone too. So that's the first thing. The second thing is for us, we're mostly concerned about removing centralized points within the industry, right? Satoshi kicked us off on this whole decentralized notion. And yet we're still highly reliant on many centralized figures and like Texas, Binance and Coinbase and such. And so we really think that not only can we build a decentralized exchange that can go cross-chain and support the biggest assets in the world, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, and so forth and so on, but we can do it more effectively, more cost-effective, more cheaply, with better UI, better UX than you can possibly do in the CeFi world. And so like we have a viewpoint that Thorchain should become the largest exchange in the world, bar none. They like by trade volume, it will one day surpass every centralized exchange and decentralized exchange. To me, that's an inevitable thing. I mean, even Uniswap does $1 billion a day, and it trades Ethereum and shit tokens. That's what it does, right? That's exactly the thing that it does. And yet, the Bitcoin ETH trade is like the most important. Bitcoin stablecoin trade is like the most liquid, pair that we have in crypto. And so while these exchanges do 10, 20, 30 billions of dollars in trade volume, all that can be done on chain. All that can be done with faster efficiency, with better velocity of money than what you can see in that. And so that's kind of the viewpoint. We also believe very strongly that like DeFi doesn't have to be attached to a particular chain, that we can build the same DeFi primitives of like AMMs, lending modules, lending systems, all sorts of different things, like even NFTs, whatever. All that stuff can be done in a chain agnostic way. And when you do it that way, you're actually engaging with a much larger community. You're not just engaging with the Ethereum community, but you're doing Ethereum plus Bitcoin plus this, plus that, plus this. And it's much more like long-term makes sense that that's the way that it should be. Right. And so I know that it's possible. I know that it's happening. I know how to build it. And we've already built the vast majority of that. And so I'm not done with this concept personally until I see Thorchain become the biggest exchange in the industry.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Merlin, any sort of final questions or parting shots for Chad while we got him?
No, I think it was really interesting to hear you chat on all those the exploit that you faced but you faced that and you continued working and here we are. I don't know what's the liquidity, but I think it's quite a big number. So yeah, that's I think like many founders could maybe learn about that experience and be more prepared for those events that I just say like 90% of every DeFi protocols have at some point had some issues in their code. So I think this is very important to be prepared and to have that in mind, that audit are not the way to go. There are many, as you say, blankets to add all the security to enhance the security of the protocol of the project. And so I think it's really interesting. Maybe if you have like some resources or like I don't know, some notes on those experiences, it could be really helpful for founders or wannabe founders.
Well, one advice I would give to founders, especially about operating in bear markets, is to be focused on the fundamentals. Focus on the KPIs. Forget about like prices outside of your reach in some sense, right? It's not you can push the micro, but the macro is going to push you around, one direction or the other. And so in Thorchain's case, like our fundamentals are stronger today than they were at the top of the bull market. Like we have more traders, we have more volume, we have like everything except for price and maybe TVL is up and to the right. At the bottom of the bear market, like we're outperforming the top of the bull, which is pretty crazy. And that's a really good way to get through the bear market, is just stay focused on like your important KPIs and deliver new features, new things, new whatever it is, new integrations. For example, we have more wallets today than we've ever had ever. So it's like stay focused on those and keep on delivering, so that you're kind of like loading the spring, in a matter of speaking, so that when the market does go bull, after X number of years, whatever the hell the time frame is, you've already done the hard work during the bear to prepare yourself for that. And then when things go, up and crazy and bubble mentality and people yelling about, safe moon or the fuck bullshit meme coin might be, that you've already loaded the spring so tightly that you're going to pop off. Like that's so that the KPIs that you've delivered on will just create a huge amount of volume and such for whatever the thing that you're working on or building.
Awesome. That was the question that I was gonna ask. I was like, do you have any final parting words of wisdom for for any founders or builders?
Ignore the price, focus on the fundamentals. What are you providing? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Are you solving it? How do you measure that? Right. And for us, it's volume, it's unique swappers, it's a bunch of different KPIs. TVL is another one we look at. But how do you solve those problems? How do you get more volume? All these kind of things. That's what I recommend. And then if you do that, then you care less about the price being, in the shit or whatever, or even the price that's, going bonkers. Either direction, fairly ignore that as noise and focus on the signal, which is your KPIs.
Awesome. I think this conversation has been really great. Not only talking us through like hacks and the response to it and how stressful it is, but then also a bit of the psychology as to how you get through those really, really stressful events, to where if you focus on what got you into it from the beginning while having an operational mindset to, sort through the security issues, investigate, focus on communications whenever you understand exactly what happened, you can ultimately come out the opposite end better than whenever you started, because it's not a if shit hits the fan in this market, it's a when. And having this kind of like blueprint to understand and navigate, I think is going to be really, really valuable.
Absolutely.
And I know it's certainly been illuminating for me. So Chad, I really appreciate you taking time out of probably your busy day and week to shed light and educate myself, Merlin, but also our listeners as well. And we can't wait to have you on another episode, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I'm always down to come back. Invite me again.